The game ended at 9:47 p.m. By 10:15, the clubhouse had been transformed. Not dramatically. Not with the theatrical excess of a franchise that needs to perform its affection for its best player. Quietly, deliberately, in the specific way that a group of people expresses genuine feeling rather than obligation, blue and white decorations along the back wall, a table arranged near the center of the room, and a cake that somebody had clearly thought about for longer than the occasion strictly required. 23 players. 12 staff members. One clubhouse attendant who had been with the organization for 11 years and had seen every kind of celebration this room was capable of producing. All of them arranged in the loose, slightly awkward formation that humans instinctively adopt when they are about to surprise someone they genuinely care about. Waiting. The footsteps in the tunnel came at 10:22. And when Shohei Ohtani walked through that door, still in his uniform, still carrying the particular focused energy of a man whose mind was almost certainly still processing the game he had just finished, and saw what his teammates had built in the 45 minutes since the final out, something happened to his face that the people in that room will not forget quickly. He stopped walking entirely. For just a moment, 3 seconds, maybe 4, the most composed athlete in professional sport simply stood in a doorway and didn't know what to do with himself. It was the most human anyone in that clubhouse had ever seen him. Shohei Ohtani turned 32 on a Tuesday night in Los Angeles, in a season that has already produced more headlines than most careers generate in their entirety. He turned 32 having already done things in this sport that the record books had no existing category for. Having already redefined, in real time, what it means to be a baseball player at the highest level. He turned 32 as a husband. As a father, twice over now, in a development that the baseball world had absorbed with the particular warmth reserved for news that has nothing to do with performance or competition or any of the things this sport normally concerns itself with. His second child had arrived 6 weeks earlier. Quietly, privately, with the same deliberate separation from public attention that Ohtani applies to everything that belongs to his family rather than his career. There had been no announcement. No social media post. No carefully timed press release designed to generate goodwill during a slow news week. Just the fact of it, confirmed eventually through the small, inevitable leaks that occur when 30 people who know something wonderful are asked to keep it entirely to themselves. A second child. Home in Los Angeles. Healthy. That was all that was shared and all that needed to be shared. But the child was present tonight. That detail, which nobody outside the organization had known until it happened, was the element that transformed a birthday party into something that transcended the category entirely. The gift was revealed 15 minutes into the celebration. Roberts had coordinated it personally. Not through an assistant. Not through the front office gift-giving infrastructure that large sports organizations develop to handle exactly these occasions. Personally, calling people, making arrangements, following up to ensure that every element was correct. Because this gift was not a gesture. It was a statement. And Roberts had wanted it to say exactly the right thing. The box was larger than anyone expected. It sat on a separate table from the cake, wrapped simply, without the excessive ornamentation that would have made it feel like a production. When Ohtani approached it, encouraged forward by his teammates with the affectionate, slightly irreverent energy that baseball clubhouses generate naturally, he paused before opening it. He looked at Roberts. Roberts looked back. Said nothing. Just nodded slightly. Ohtani opened the box. Inside was a custom jersey. But not his jersey. Not number 17 in Dodger blue with his name across the back. Something different. Something that took him a moment to fully process, long enough that the room, already quiet in anticipation, became completely still. 2 jerseys. Miniature. Side by side in the box. One for his eldest son. One, smaller still, the size appropriate for an infant, for the child who had arrived 6 weeks ago. Both in Dodger blue. Both with a name across the back that was not Ohtani. A name that was a combination, something the players had apparently discussed and agreed upon, a word in Japanese that translated roughly to something between legacy and beginning. A name invented for the occasion by teammates who had spent more time thinking about this gift than a birthday party typically warrants. Ohtani stared at those two jerseys for a long time. Nobody rushed him. Nobody filled the silence with noise. The room simply held the moment and let it be what it was. When he finally looked up, his eyes were doing something that eyes in this room had not done before. Not quite tears. Not the performed emotion of someone who knows they are being watched. Something quieter and more specific, the involuntary response of a person who has been genuinely surprised by the depth of care in the people around them. Who had not expected to feel this scene. Who didn't entirely know what to do with being this known. He pressed his lips together once. Looked down at the jerseys again. Then back at the room. "This is," he began, in English. And then stopped. Started again. "This is too much." The room laughed, warmly, genuinely, with the specific relief that laughter provides when it follows a moment of real emotion. And in that laughter, the tension broke just enough for what came next to become possible. The speech was not planned. Nobody had asked Ohtani to speak. Nobody had prepared remarks or arranged a microphone or created any formal structure around the expectation that he would say something. It was a birthday party in a baseball clubhouse, not a ceremony. But Ohtani set the jerseys down carefully. Turned to face the room fully. Squared his shoulders in the way he squares his shoulders before a pitch. And began to speak. In English. This was the first thing that landed. Because while Ohtani's English has developed considerably since his arrival in the United States, improving steadily, visibly, in the way that a person improves at anything they approach with genuine intentionality, he has remained characteristically conservative about using it in emotionally significant contexts. His press conferences are still primarily conducted through an interpreter. His public communications default to Japanese when the subject is anything beyond the routine. To choose English now, in this room, for this moment, was itself a communication. It said, "I want every person here to receive this directly." Without translation. Without the small distance that interpretation creates between what is felt and what arrives. The room understood immediately. You could see it in the way people shifted their posture. Leaned slightly forward. The way the ambient noise that always exists in a group of 35 people, the shuffling, the murmuring, the constant low-level movement, simply stopped. He spoke for 6 minutes. He began with gratitude. But not the generic, performed gratitude of a post-game interview. Specific gratitude, names, moments, particular acts of kindness that he had stored and apparently never forgotten. He thanked the clubhouse attendant by name. Mentioned something the man had done in the first week of spring training 2 years ago, a small gesture, almost certainly forgotten by the person who had made it, that Ohtani had carried with him since. The attendant, who had stood quietly at the edge of the room with the habitual invisibility of someone who considers themselves a background figure, looked suddenly and completely visible. His expression was the expression of a man who has just been told that he was seen when he thought he wasn't. He thanked the training staff for something specific that he didn't elaborate on, a decision made during a moment of physical difficulty earlier in the season that he said had allowed him to keep pitching when the easier choice would have been to shut him down. He looked at each of them as he said it. Making sure it landed in the right places. He thanked Roberts last among the staff. And here his English slowed down, not because he was struggling to find words, but because he was finding the exact ones. "You protect things," he said to Roberts. "Not just the game. The things around the game. The things that make it possible to play the game the right way. I don't always say this. But I think about it. A lot." Roberts, who manages his expressions in public with practiced discipline, did not manage his expression at this particular moment. The room noticed. Nobody mentioned it. Then Ohtani turned to his teammates. And this is the part that people in that room, when they describe the evening in the days and weeks that follow, return to most consistently. Not the gift. Not the tears that almost came. Not even the English, though that detail never fully loses its power in the retelling. This part. He talked about what it means to play alongside people who understand something that is very difficult to explain to those outside it. The specific weight of expectation that attaches itself to a player of his visibility. The way that weight, if the people around you are not actively helping you carry it, becomes something that changes how you move and think and compete. He said, slowly, carefully, in the English that he had chosen deliberately for exactly this purpose, that he had played in different places and for different organizations and that he had never, until this one, felt the weight distributed the way it was distributed here. In this room, he said, I am not the one who carries it. We carry it. All of us. And because of that, he paused, searching for the phrase, I can just play baseball. Just baseball. Nothing extra. The room was completely silent. That is the greatest gift, he said. More than the jerseys. A small smile. Though the jerseys are very good. The laughter that followed was the kind that arrives with relief and affection simultaneously, the sound of a group of people exhaling together after something real has passed through the room. He was holding his second child when he cut the cake. This was the detail that nobody had anticipated and everyone will remember. Because the image of it, Shohei Ohtani, 32 years old, the most scrutinized athlete in baseball, standing in his game uniform with a piece of cake in one hand and his infant child cradled against his chest with the other, was so completely at odds with every public image of him that has ever existed that it required a moment of genuine recalibration. Not the pitcher. Not the hitter. Not the phenomenon or the record breaker or the subject of 1,000 analytical pieces about what his existence means for the future of this sport. A father at a birthday party. Slightly awkward in the specific way that people are slightly awkward when they are happy and don't have a routine prepared for happiness. Holding his child with the careful, instinctive attention of a parent who is simultaneously aware of everything around them and focused entirely on the small weight in their arms. His eldest son stood beside him. Also in the room, brought by Mamiko, who had arrived quietly during the latter part of the celebration, whose presence in the clubhouse had caused its own small wave of warmth to move through the group. His son, who had stood on an empty field not long ago with a bat too large for his hands and his father's expression on his face, now stood next to his father in a room full of baseball players and looked around at everything with the wide, absorptive attention of a child who is storing something for later. Ohtani looked down at him once during the cake cutting. Just briefly. The kind of look that parents give their children when they think nobody is watching, complete, unguarded, containing everything that cannot be said in a room full of people. His son looked back up at him. And in that exchange, that wordless, private, completely human moment in the middle of a baseball clubhouse on a Tuesday night in Los Angeles, something was visible that all the statistics and all the headlines and all the careful analysis of what Shohei Ohtani means to this sport cannot fully capture. What he is when the game is over. Who he is when the uniform is still on but the competition has stopped and what remains is just a person, in a room, surrounded by people who care about him, holding his child, turning 32. That person. The one who stopped in a doorway for 4 seconds because he didn't know what to do with being loved this specifically. That was the most unbelievable thing anyone in that room saw all night. Not the gift. Not the speech. Not even the English, though the English was extraordinary.